not quite that bad, but it was. So he said to me, "Gee, how truck drivers do it?" And I said, "Really, truck drivers do it?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, get yourself a couple of truck drivers." I quit. So I resigned. I left. And about 2 weeks later, I got a call from the Jefferson Airplane saying that there was nobody at RCA they wanted to work with over there, and they allowed them to get an outside producer, and they wanted me to do it. So I said, sure. I did it. Back in those days, I was making $17,500 a year, and I could make $5,000 bonus if my records did well. And I did that every year, so 22.5. I did one album with the Jefferson Airplane. My first royalty check was $50,000. I said, oh my God. So that was it. So then I just stayed independent and did 4 albums with the Airplane and Hot Tuna and a couple albums with Jackson Browne and just on and on and on. And then Tommy called me, and you heard the letter, and to do the Dave Mason thing. I said, gee, Tommy, I haven't done any engineering in a long time. Because at RCA, you couldn't touch the board because of the union. So he said, no, you can do it. He said, it's like a horse. I said, okay, it's like a horse. I said, I'll tell you what, we'll do it. And if I feel I'm not doing this right, I'm leaving, and that's okay. And he said, yeah. And I said, you have to tell me if you're not happy. He said, fine. So we got in and did it. It was this great album with Dave Mason called Alone Together. And while I was doing it, I realized this is what I got into this business for in the first place. This capturing sound and mixing, putting this puzzle together, and and I was just so happy. So from then on, I started doing a lot of it, and I was doing Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks with Tommy. I was doing all of Tommy's records. And then we wound up one night, Tommy and I were coming back from Sausalito in San Francisco, and we drove, and there was a big sign. George Benson was playing at this club. And we just loved George. I mean, at that point, he was great. And we went and watched the set, and he sang Summertime. It just killed us, God, how great that is. Boy, wouldn't it be great to do an album with him one day? Sure enough, he gets signed. Bob Krasnow signed him, I believe, at Warner Brothers. And Tommy. And here I am in the studio with George. And we did this record, I think it was 4.5, 5 days maybe at the most, recording. And then Tommy and I went over to Germany and had Klaus put on the strings. And that's a real story. We get to Germany with the tapes, and we're at this gorgeous studio, and then we look over, and there's a Telefunken tape machine, and I look over, and it's 7.5 and 15 IPS, the machine. Our tapes are 30 IPS, and that was the only machine they had. So we didn't know what we were going to do. Fortunately, Klaus knew Giorgio Moroder, and Giorgio had a studio, a small studio. We had a symphony orchestra practically, small studio. So we crammed everybody in there, and we worked till about 5 in the morning and got half of it done, and then decided to do the rest of it in London on Sunday. So Tommy had 3, and I had 3 days off, and he said, you ever been to Paris? I said, no. Want to go to Paris? I said, sure. So we went to Paris. I don't think we slept an hour. We really partied hardy. And anyway, then we came back and mixed the record, and with all that, and with what we did and everything else, that whole album, and Tommy brags about this all the time, cost less than $50,000 to do. And it was such a great record. I mean, my wife still listens to it all the time. I mean, it's just an incredible record. It's just the chemistry of everybody, and just George. You would talk to George. He'd be standing there talking, and he'd be just playing stuff, and you'd hear this unbelievable stuff come out of the guitar. It's just amazing. So a little funny story with that. Tommy, there was one vocal they were going to do, and it came time to do that vocal, and I thought it would be, because we had everybody in a circle, and so I looked around. There was this cheap little mic sitting there, and I grabbed it and put it on George because I didn't want to waste any time, and that was first take, Masquerade, and took me a long time to talk George out of using that mic after that. He liked that mic. That was great.
Switch that one off.
Is this one on?
We're going to switch that one off.
Oh. I don't know how does this work? So anyway, that was the start of working with George, and God, we did some incredible records with him. Weekend in L.A., and that was a great trip, and George was always great to be in the studio with. That was a real honor for me. And then Tommy and I were doing a lot of stuff, and the next thing I know is we're going to do this record with Natalie Cole. And that was another incredible thing. When we did Unforgettable, after we finished it, I remember going over to Lahaina. George had a studio over there. George and I were going to work together at the studio over there for a few days. And I played it for him, and I'll never forget the expression on his face. It was just, oh my God, it was just spectacular. And anyway, that's still one of my all-time favorite records. We do a lot of that now, but that was the first time for me, and I had a lot of help on that, but it was a great experience and a great record. And the first time I heard it on the air, it was just killed me. Same thing happened again with Toto when we did Rosanna. It was like second take. I remember that because I've been working a lot with Jeff and Picaro, yeah. Jeff Picaro. And so I think when they were going to do Toto, excuse me, I think Umberto was going to do it or something. I can't remember what happened, but something happened and it didn't work out. And Jeff asked me to do it, and so I went over. We did it at Sunset Sound, and they were rehearsing, and I got all the sounds. I remember David Page saying, "Oh, when is all going to get sounds?" I said, "Well, we're ready to go," and we went when they came in, and Rosanna was it was spectacular, and I called a friend of mine who said, the next time you're going to win a Grammy, let me know, because I'd like to go with you. I called him on the phone. I said, I think this record's going to get a lot of Grammys. It was a great record. And we did Africa, and working with that crew was an experience. That's it. Yeah. It was, we had a lot of fun. God, it was incredible. I mean, we got a lot of work done and a lot of great music, but there was a lot of camaraderie and a lot of laughs and just a lot of fun doing it. I've been totally blessed. I mean, I'm really one of those people you read about, that just found his way and just, total joy and happiness in my life. So it's great. I can't imagine. I always told my kids, and I have a few of them, I have 4 boys and a girl. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you love what you're doing, because I'm just happy every day I go to work. I love being in the studio. It's It's great when I'm off. My wife tells me I get grumpy.
So what do you attribute that? What is it about the studio and that process that brings you such happiness and keep going back to
I don't
it?
know. It's a creative thing, you know. To start with something that, you know, it's just like a little bud, and it just opens up into this great flower, and it's just the beauty of it all. And you know, when I was at RCA, I did a lot of some country records and some classical records and some things that I wasn't really into, but I learned to listen to the sounds of the instruments and just get off on that, and it would always work out for me.
I read somewhere that you also really pursue challenge in your work. It keeps it interesting for you. Not only does it move you to be in there and be part of the artistry, but you're always sort of seeking new challenges in the work. As somebody who's just coming in to this line of creative endeavor, what would you recommend to them for that? How do you find new challenges in your work on an everyday basis?
Well, I think almost every day is a new challenge. You know, when you go in, it's always something different. You know, if you're mixing, it's like putting a puzzle together. You know, start putting these pieces together, and all of a sudden this thing just blossoms. And the same when you start recording, you know, getting bass sounds and drum sounds. And I'm really quick, so I get it together pretty fast. So, you know, I can hear what's going on almost instantly. And so that makes a big difference. And then, you know, I get to work with, you know, 80-piece orchestras and trios, you know, and everything in between. It's just great.
You mentioned, if I can go back to sort of early 70s when you stepped back into mixing, certainly the technology had changed dramatically by that point. There's a lot more tracks to mix and things like that, and it's continuing to evolve strictly into the digital realm now and things. Has that changed your philosophy or your approach in that, or is there still a fundamental base that you have there to which you return, no matter how many tracks or what the technology is?
For me, I think it's still fundamental. You know, I use Pro Tools like a tape machine, you know. We move things around and tune things, obviously, but basically I use it as just as if it was a large tape machine, and we have, you know, an infinite amount of tracks.
It speeds up the process for everybody.
Well, it does and it doesn't. You know, the fact that we can do all these things we can do takes so much long. I did a record with Ray Charles and Betty Carter. I think it took 7.5 hours to do the whole record.